case of Diamond Bradley. Diamond Bradley was born on March 21, 2001, in Clarksville, Tennessee. She had an older brother named Quan, who was 3 years her senior. After her parents, Doris and Philip, separated, Doris sought a quieter and safer environment for her children, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. She moved her children, including Diamond's sibling Quan, to Spring Valley, Illinois, a small town where relatives also lived. This allowed Diamond and Quan to grow up with their cousins. Spring Valley is a small town located along the Illinois River with a population of around 5,000 in February 2002. Unlike larger towns, Spring Valley has no big shopping malls or tall buildings, but everyone there is very close-knit, relying on each other's support. Doris worked as a cook at a local nursing home for over 15 years, allowing her to provide for her children as they grew up. As Doris's busy schedule sometimes kept her away, her son Quan took on a significant role in caring for his younger sister, Diamond. He took on the roles of a guardian, mentor, and protective older brother, establishing a deep and enduring bond with her. Diamond also spent a lot of time with her cousin Giovanna, who looked so much like her that many people thought they were twins. Doris later had 2 more children, a girl named Malia and a boy named Quentin. Spring Valley was an ideal place to raise a family, but it had limited activities for teenagers. As a young girl at the time, Diamond enjoyed singing, dancing, playing with her siblings, and taking photos. But as social media and smartphones became increasingly popular, Diamond began spending more time online. She gradually began seeking out online friends and connections for social interaction and entertainment purposes. By the time she was 13 years old in February 2014, Diamond started actively posting a variety of content on her social media page. Diamond shared her personal life on social media, including her relationships and social engagements. She was especially close to her family, particularly her mother, and often expressed her love and affection for them online. As she entered adulthood, she used social media to seek advice or simply express her thoughts and feelings. She was not immune to the typical struggles of adolescence, sometimes finding it necessary to confide in others or experiencing overwhelming distrust. Although Diamond's family members, including Doris, interacted with her social media posts, she longed for attention and engagement from her peers. Since she had few friends in Spring Valley, her interest in boys started to grow, and she used social media as a digital diary to express her thoughts and feelings. She frequently posted updates, sometimes multiple times a day, allowing others to follow her life and thoughts. During this time, Diamond was very close to her family, but sometimes she felt an overwhelming sense of emptiness and disconnection. To fill this void, she turned to social media, where she openly shared her struggles with forming friendships and expressed her deep longing for affection and attention. Through her posts, Diamond openly expressed her honest thoughts and feelings to anyone who would listen. Diamond was a high school student who had recently started dating Nicholas Nelson, and the two seemed like a perfect match. They spent a lot of time together and genuinely seemed to be in love. Despite her youth, Diamond had big ambitions. She wanted to pursue a career in nursing. The Diamond household was filled with love and laughter on January 23, 2018, as friends and family gathered to celebrate Doris's birthday. The evening was filled with warmth and joy, complete with a festive cake, music, and the company of dear loved ones. Doris completely did not foresee that her life was about to change suddenly and tragically. As the party came to a close, guests began to leave around 10 p.m. Doris told her daughter, Diamond, good night, and Diamond went to take a shower. The next morning, Doris got up just before 7 a.m. to prepare breakfast and get the younger kids ready for school. However, when she went to wake up Diamond, she was nowhere to be found. Her bedroom upstairs was vacant as well. Initially, Doris was not worried because she understood her daughter's habit of running to the nearby gas station to buy coffee in the morning. However, as time passed and Diamond still hadn't returned, her worries increased. Diamond did not have her own car, and the weather outside was wet with snow and wind, so she wouldn't be able to go for a walk. When Doris tried to call Diamond, her calls went straight to voicemail, which was unusual. By 8:30 a.m., DeCoyne, Diamond's father, arrived at her house as they had previously arranged. What made him worried was Diamond's unusual silence. She typically made an effort to stay in touch with her family to avoid worrying them. Doris's concern for her daughter, Diamond, grew by the hour. Despite contacting all of Diamond's acquaintances, no one had any information about her whereabouts. DeCoin searched the town but found no sign of her. As the hours passed, Doris experienced a mix of emotions, from fear to anger, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to her daughter. This was the longest Diamond had ever gone without contacting her, and Doris's anxiety became unbearable. When her family searched on their own without results, Doris reported her daughter missing to the police at 6 p.m. Police began an investigation immediately. They contacted Diamond's cell phone provider to try to determine the last location of her phone by tracking cell tower signals. A prompt check on the device's activity revealed that it was last active at 7:18 a.m. near Tonopah, Illinois, approximately 5 miles northwest of a cell tower. However, this information only narrowed the search area and did not provide a specific location. Following this discovery, the phone stopped working due to a dead battery or deliberate shutdown, as there was no further activity. Diamond's mother anxiously clung to the hope that her niece, Giovanna, who had been in contact with Diamond the previous evening, might be able to provide crucial information. Diamond often shared her thoughts and plans with Giovanna. Sensing the seriousness of the situation, Giovanna revealed a secret to Doris. Diamond had a phone that she used to access the internet via Wi-Fi, which was unknown to her family. Diamond's brother, Quan, discovered a cell phone in a dresser drawer that was protected by a password and without a cellular plan. This discovery surprised Doris. She had no knowledge of her daughter owning a secret phone. Concerned, Doris immediately took the phone to the police, hoping to find clues that would help locate her missing daughter. Upon examination, investigators suspected that the phone was used for activities of which Doris would not have approved. After breaking the lock screen, they encountered additional security, requiring individual passwords for each app. However, notifications visible on the lock screen revealed several people inviting Diamond to meet up. The investigation found that Diamond had been using the phone to interact with people on dating platforms, which shocked Doris but was not a surprise to Giovanna. However, Doris was upset by the discovery because she had always been concerned about her daughter's dating, especially her attraction to older men and the potential dangers of online interactions. As a result, Doris had repeatedly warned Diamond to be cautious when communicating with strangers online, especially since she knew her daughter had a tendency to lie about her age. Diamond's mother and Quan had cautioned her about the risks of growing up too quickly, but she created an online profile that made her appear older anyway. As the search for Diamond continued, law enforcement agencies looked beyond the internet for clues. They spoke with people in the neighborhood, checked nearby stores, and collected surveillance footage to try to find any leads. At Diamond's usual coffee shop, the police found one camera with low-quality video that showed a dark-colored vehicle and its male driver, who appeared to be an adult. With very little evidence to work with, the police focused on this man and carefully examined the video to see if they could find any details that might reveal Diamond's location. To aid in the search for his missing younger sister, Diamond's brother, Quan, traversed nearby towns, posting flyers with her photo and a detailed description. His theory was that she had been abducted and taken outside of their town. He felt that time was limited and swift action was necessary. He couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for oversleeping that morning and not returning home sooner, as he believed he might have prevented Diamond's disappearance had he done so. On January 25th, Jasmine, another of Diamond's cousins, visited the police station to share crucial information that could aid in locating Diamond. Jasmine discovered a disturbing truth about Diamond's online activity. It was putting her in greater danger. Diamond had been exploring dating websites and noticed ads for paid meetups with men, which piqued her interest. She learned that some men would pay women to meet up with them. What Jasmine found out was that, unknown to everyone, Diamond had been experimenting with this idea. In fact, Diamond had even posted her own ads on adult websites, which explained why her phone's lock screen was filled with notifications. Doris's daughter, Diamond, had been receiving numerous messages from unfamiliar men, who responded to her online profiles and advertisements. The majority of these messages were from older men. Doris was shocked and felt guilty as a mother. She could never have imagined that her underage daughter would use this way to make money. Kwan's perspective, however, differed from Doris's. He believed that his mother always balanced between being strict and giving her children independence. Diamond may not have understood the severity of her actions. She may have thought that she would be paid for spending time on dates, especially with older men who she thought would be more generous. She was exploring life with the curiosity and inexperience of youth, unaware of the hidden dangers on those digital platforms. The temptation of easy money for social activities online can be particularly enticing for young girls. The police knew that many young people in Spring Valley felt trapped in a dull routine, spending most of their free time on the internet, a world that their parents didn't fully understand. As a result, many parents were unaware of the online risks their children faced every day. The local police asked the FBI for help in analyzing data from Diamond's main phone to track her movements on the day she disappeared. With the FBI's advanced resources, they were able to map out Diamond's route, indicating she was likely in a moving vehicle due to the speed of her movement. Investigators then reviewed nearby surveillance footage and found 13 vehicles that matched the time and location, but unfortunately, the poor image quality made it impossible to read the license plate numbers. As detectives examined Diamond's digital communications, they focused on her interactions on dating apps and social media platforms. A key clue was a message Diamond sent on the morning of her disappearance to a 26-year-old man known as Jay. He confirmed that he had a romantic connection with Diamond but stated that he ended contact after learning her true age on the morning of January 24th at 6 a.m. Earlier that morning, Diamond had invited Jay to meet at an IHOP restaurant, but she quickly rescinded the invitation, apologizing and claiming she meant to send the message to someone else. Jay responded with a harmless smiley face at 6:40 a.m. Not long after, Diamond sent a disturbing message saying, "She dying." Doris was consumed by anger and desperation after learning Jay was the last person to see her 16-year-old daughter, Diamond. In her distress, she quickly accused Jay of harming her child. However, Jay had an alibi. He claimed to have spent the entire night at home playing video games with a friend. Although Jay was initially hesitant to reveal the friend's identity, he eventually disclosed that it was Giovanna, Diamond's cousin. This information complicated the investigation, and it also did not help investigators find Diamond. Investigators refocused on the black Jeep, finding more surveillance footage showing it heading to Putnam County, where Diamond's phone signal disappeared, either because the phone was turned off or the battery ran out. The vehicle became central to the investigation, as authorities believed it was involved in Diamond's disappearance. However, the situation took a dire turn on January 27th, 3 days after Diamond was reported missing, when the Putnam County Sheriff's Office received a concerning call before noon. A pedestrian walking down Pebble Path in Granville Township found the body of a young African-American woman in a ditch beside the road. When the head of Putnam County authorities arrived, they realized the woman's death was no accident. She had been intentionally killed. Her body showed multiple wounds on her back, stomach, legs, arms, and hands. The discovery prompted the police chief to recall a recent missing person report from Spring Valley that matched the woman's description, leading him to make an urgent call. The area where Diamond's body was found was a rural landscape covered in snow, with cornfields on either side of a narrow path. The nearest house was several miles away. Unfortunately, part of her body was submerged in water from a brook flowing through a ditch. A close examination of her remains revealed defensive injuries, indicating that she fought back fiercely until the very end. Following this heartbreaking discovery, the lead detective had the difficult task of informing Diamond's family about her tragic death. At 7 p.m., police arrived at the doorstep, and Doris immediately had a foreboding feeling, a sense of impending sorrow. Even before the police spoke, a mother's intuition sensed something was terribly wrong. Kwan came home to an atmosphere of unimaginable grief, faced with the harsh reality that Diamond was gone forever. The devastating news that she had been found deceased was too much for him to bear, causing him to faint. When the news spread through the small community, everyone was deeply shaken. Many were worried about letting their children play outside, fearing the suspect might be nearby. To aid in their search, investigators closely examined the security footage of a black Jeep, focusing on key details. The police sought the expertise of a specialized automotive shop, and a technician carefully reviewed the footage. The technician was able to identify the Jeep as a specific model year of the Jeep Wrangler. With this new information, the police searched their databases for Jeep owners in the area who matched the suspect description. After contacting several owners of similar Jeeps, the officers visited a house a few kilometers north of where Diamond's remains were found. When they arrived, a woman answered the door and told them the owner of the black Jeep had moved to a different town called Standard, but unfortunately, she didn't have their new address. Standard, a small community with a population of about 200 people located just 2 miles away, made the search for the suspect less overwhelming. While patrolling the area, the police found a black Jeep Wrangler parked in the driveway of a house. The vehicle belonged to 26-year-old Richard Henderson. On January 24th, Richard had driven to Spring Valley and stopped at a gas station across from the Bradley residence, matching the individual seen in the gas station surveillance footage. According to the video, he waited at the gas station for a call from a friend but left before the call came through. The detectives carefully studied Richard's behavior, paying close attention to the pauses in his story and the expressions on his face. In particular, they noticed that he hesitated when they asked him the name of his friend. He revealed that her name was Diamond but admitted that he didn't know her last name. As the detectives continued to question him, they skillfully guided the conversation to extract more information. Eventually, Richard confessed to meeting Diamond that day, although their original plans were canceled. However, his alibi raised suspicions. He claimed to have left Diamond at a mobile home, which seemed inconsistent with the direction her phone had been moving. The investigators became suspicious. They decided to drive along the route Richard and Diamond had taken that day to gather more information. Starting from the gas station, they drove past the intersection that had been caught on video, over a bridge, and into the rural area of Putnam County. The drive ended where Diamond's phone signal stopped working. What remains of the little girl are stuffed toys and artificial flowers at her memorial next to the streambed. When questioned by the detective about the site, Richard became overcome with emotion, tears streaming down his face. The detective took advantage of this vulnerable moment to press Richard for more information about what had happened. Richard described the incidents that occurred as follows. He and Diamond had gone to a secluded area for a private encounter. Afterward, he asked her to leave his car, but she refused and pulled out a knife. A fight broke out, and Richard claimed he was acting in self-defense. He stated that in an attempt to block her knife, the blade accidentally stabbed her in the abdomen. According to Richard, she continued to be aggressive, so he disarmed her and hit her twice in what he described as further self-defense. Ultimately, he left her in a nearby ditch. The autopsy results contradicted Richard's story, revealing that Diamond had received over 20 stab wounds, with some of them found on her back. Given the substantial physical disparity between Richard and Diamond, Richard's explanation became extremely improbable. As a fully grown adult, nearly 6 feet tall and weighing twice as much as Diamond, who was just under 5 feet tall, he was attacking a young child. Tragically, Diamond had already lost her life by the time the search for her began. At the funeral, over 200 people came together, including family, friends, classmates, and teachers from Spring Valley High School. Because Doris chose cremation for Diamond, she was able to keep her daughter's remains with her at all times. The thought of leaving Diamond in a graveyard was too difficult for Doris to bear. As a result, she took Diamond's urn with her everywhere she went, even to court during Richard's sentencing. Richard Henderson pleaded guilty to avoid a life sentence and was given a 53-year prison term without the possibility of parole. Doris considered ending her life because of the overwhelming sadness of being separated from her daughter, but thinking about her remaining child, Quan, gave her the strength to continue living. Kamaya Mobley was born on July 10, 1998, in a hospital in Jacksonville, Florida. Her parents are Shannara Mobley and Greg Aiken. Greg was imprisoned at the time for drug possession and delivery, and also because he was 19 and Shannara was 15 at the time of Kamaya's conception. 8 hours after being born, Kamaya was abducted by a woman who impersonated a nurse. The woman dressed as a nurse assisted and talked with Shannara Mobley, and then later walked out of the room with Kamaya in her arms. The abductor was believed to be about 25 years old and possibly wore a pair of glasses and a wig. Investigators from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office followed more than 2,000 leads from as far away as Nova Scotia, but none of them led to baby Kamaya. Unbeknownst to Kamaya's family and investigators, the woman who abducted Kamaya was Gloria Williams. She was in an abusive relationship and had miscarried a child a week before the abduction, which is believed to be her motive. Gloria created a new identity for Kamaya. She was raised as Alexis Manigault in Walterboro, South Carolina, and graduated from Colleton County High School. In 2017, investigators reopened the case of Kamaya Mobley. A computer-generated composite was then created to show what an 18-year-old Kamaya Mobley would look like. This image was distributed to the media. Investigators received a few tips that led them to 18-year-old Alexis Manigault. Her DNA was taken, and it matched the DNA that was taken from Kamaya Mobley after she was born. 51-year-old Gloria Williams was then arrested in South Carolina and extradited to Florida. She was charged with kidnapping and interfering with custody. In 2018, Gloria pleaded guilty to kidnapping. She admitted that she had acted alone in the 1998 abduction. On June 8, 2018, Gloria was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the kidnapping of Kamaya Mobley. She is currently serving her sentence at the Hernando Correctional Institution. Kamaya still communicates with Gloria and calls her Mom. She also said Gloria had raised her with everything she needed. Kamaya connected with her biological family over FaceTime initially. Then, in December 2019, Kamaya moved to Jacksonville, Florida, to be closer to her family. In January 2020, a movie about the case was made called Stolen by My Mother, the Kamaya Mobley story. A surprising fact that was made public was that Kamaya knew she had been abducted and what her real name was since she was 16. Gloria told her everything because Kamaya could not get a social security number. The two of them kept the secret for 2 years until investigators figured it out. Shannara sued the hospital for oversight and was awarded $1.2 million. Not everything has gone smoothly since it was discovered that Alexis is actually Kamaya. For instance, she still prefers to go by Alexis, and her relationship with Shannara has been strained because Kamaya still often contacts Gloria. Recently, however, it appeared as if the story has a happy ending after all. Kamaya uploaded a picture of Greg and Shannara with the caption, "Parents." 14-year-old Tina Fells lived in Pleasanton, California in 1984. She attended Foothill High School. On April 5th, Tina was walking home from school. She normally took the bus, but some of the other students had been picking on her, so she decided to walk home instead. Tina took a shortcut, walking on a path that connected Astor Court to Lemonwood Way. Then she used the I-680 underpass to her Valley Trails home, but Tina would never make it there. Her family got worried and called 911 to inform investigators that Tina was missing. Her body was quickly found close to the underpass. Tina had been stabbed 44 times. Investigators found DNA from the attacker at the crime scene. Investigators could, however, not find a solid suspect, and the case went cold for some time. In 2011, investigators submitted the DNA that was found at the crime scene to the Cody's database. It led investigators to a man who was already in jail, Stephen Carlson. Stephen was 16 years old at the time of the crime. He attended the same school as Tina. Stephen also lived right next to the crime scene, and he told people at a party in 1986 that he took Tina's life, but later claimed that he was joking. Stephen said that he was innocent, but he was convicted in 2014 for taking the life of Tina. He was sentenced to 26 years in prison. It was only in October 2020 that he confessed to what he had done. He sent confession letters to Tina's family. Here are some of the things he said in the letters. On that day of April 5, 1984, I want you and your family to know you did absolutely nothing to deserve what I did to you. That is what makes what I did so callous and horrific. On the day that he took her life, he was also picked on at school. He had an altercation with the school football team, where he ended up in a dumpster. Asterisk. I remember being full of rage at the way all my classmates were laughing at me. Everything happened so fast. I remember going to the kitchen and grabbing a butcher knife. I walked across the street into the field, that is, where Tina Fells was. You were just minding your own business. Having to walk home by yourself, and having to walk past that scary drainage tunnel could have also been terrifying to a 14-year-old girl, but only to be horrifically surprised by me attacking you. Asterisk. Tina's brother, Drew Fells, was just 8 years old when he lost his sister. He said he is glad Stephen confessed. It is nice knowing that he is admitting it. That part makes me feel better to get confirmation, but it does not resolve anything. Classmates of Stephen and Tina were not surprised that Stephen was guilty. They said that his nickname was Creepy Carlson in school. The case of April Tinsley. April Tinsley was born on March 18, 1980, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the oldest child in her family. She attended elementary school and was a member of the children's choir at her local church. April enjoyed playing with her friends around the neighborhood. On Friday, April 1, 1988, when she turned 8, April came home from school eager to play. After lunch, she asked her mother if she could visit her friend Nicole, who lived just a few hundred yards away. Her mother agreed, as their neighborhood was very safe. Before April left, her mother reminded her to call Nicole as soon as she got to her house and gave her an umbrella, as it was nearly 3 p.m. and rain was expected. A few minutes later, when she arrived at Nicole's house, April called her mother. Her mother told her to be home by 4 p.m. When that time passed, April still hadn't returned, causing her mother to worry that she might have gotten caught in the rain. She called Nicole's house to check on her. Nicole's mother answered and said that April and Nicole had gone to a nearby playground. It started to rain, and April realized that she had left her umbrella at Nicole's house. She told Nicole that she would go back to Nicole's house to get her umbrella and then come home, since she had promised her mother that she would return when it started to rain. April returned home while Nicole went to another friend's house to play, and the two girls parted ways. When April's mother did not see her daughter return, she called Nicole's mother to ask about the situation, and Nicole's mother told her that April had not come to pick up her umbrella, even though she had left the playground nearly an hour earlier. April's mother was worried, and she informed her husband that their daughter was missing. They both went out to look for April, and some neighbors joined them when they heard about April's disappearance. They searched all the streets connecting Nicole's house, the playground, and their house, but they found no sign of her. Finally, her parents decided to contact the police. The police came to their house, investigated April's information, and began the search. Within hours, many neighbors had joined together to help the Tinsley family search for April, scouring the area along the route she often took, but they found no sign of her. As night fell, the police began to fear that she might have been kidnapped, believing they would have found her if she had simply gotten lost. It seemed as if she had disappeared completely. The next day, the search area was expanded, and news of April's disappearance spread throughout the city. Even with more police and volunteers involved, they still found no trace of her or any clues. April had been missing for 3 days until April 4th, when a man went jogging about 20 miles from April's home. While running through some fields, he saw a human body lying in a ditch. Alarmed, he called 911 to report the incident. Police quickly arrived at the scene and identified the body as April Tinsley. She was fully clothed, except for one shoe, which was missing. Although officers did not see any obvious signs of trauma, police suspected that April had been murdered. They believed that the perpetrator may have killed her elsewhere and then left her body in the ditch. Near the body, police also discovered an adult toy, but they were unsure if it was related to the case. They later found April's missing shoe across the street. The autopsy results showed that April died of asphyxiation and sexual assault. They estimated that her death occurred within 2 days before her body was discovered, indicating that the perpetrator had kept her alive for some time. The police collected DNA from the body, but at that time, the FBI did not have a DNA database, and DNA analysis was not yet advanced. Therefore, the police had to focus on finding new clues. After the body was found, the police appealed to the public through the media to receive more information about the case. Two important clues emerged. A man contacted police to report that he had driven past the field where April's body was found and had noticed an old blue pickup truck parked on the side of the road. Police thought the truck might have belonged to the killer and that witnesses might have seen it when the suspect dumped April's body. The second clue was even more important. A woman who lived along the road from the playground to Nicole's house claimed that she had seen a girl who looked like April on the day she went missing. A witness reported that as April walked down the street, an old blue pickup truck stopped next to her. Moments later, the truck drove away with her. The vehicle blocked the witness's view, making it impossible for them to see how the girl got into the truck. The witness also described the driver as a white man, about 30 years old, with blonde hair. Police created a sketch of the suspect and shared it with the media, hoping that someone would identify him. The FBI soon joined the investigation. Together with the police, they looked into the possible involvement of all the men who had previously been convicted of sex crimes living in April's area and tried to find new leads. The police then received a tip that the suspect's profile matched that of a man who had been involved in some organized crime and had joined Satanism. The police checked him out but found no connection to April's case. However, the police arrested him for another crime. The police continued to follow up on other leads, but they made no progress. This went on for months, and eventually the police hit a dead end. During the investigation into April's murder, police uncovered several other crimes against children and arrested several suspects, but they were unable to identify April's killer. For many years, there were no significant updates on the case. However, in May 1990, a breakthrough occurred. A boy, who lived about 10 miles from where April's body was found, discovered a note on his shed. The note appeared to be from the killer, who confessed to killing April and hinted that more killings might occur in the future. The author of the note also asked if police had found April's shoe. This led police to suspect that the person who wrote the note was indeed April's killer. At that time, the media had not reported that April's shoe was found several hundred yards from her body, meaning only the killer would know this information. Another interesting detail is that the message was originally written in pencil and then outlined in marker. This led police to believe that the perpetrator may have left the message months ago and then returned to make it more visible by tracing it. Police decided to release a photo of the message in the hopes that someone would recognize the handwriting, but this effort yielded no leads. A few months later, Fort Wayne residents were shocked to hear that police had discovered the body of a 7-year-old girl in another part of the city. She had been sexually assaulted and died of asphyxiation. Because of the alarming similarities to April's case, police suspected that the same killer was responsible for both murders. However, FBI analysts believed that the two cases involved two different perpetrators. No progress was made in either case until 1995, when it was confirmed that the murder was committed by a deceased family friend. As a result, the case was closed, and police no longer linked it to April's murder. Police were also awaiting new messages from the killer. His original message said he enjoyed taunting police. Years passed without any new evidence. However, in February 2004, the situation changed dramatically. A girl from Fort Wayne discovered a Ziploc plastic bag in her bicycle basket containing a terrifying note. She immediately gave it to her parents, who then contacted the police. The note read, "Hello, honey. I've been watching you. I'm the one who kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered April Tinsley. I have a gift for you. You will be my next victim if you don't call the police and if I don't see this note on the local news tomorrow. I will destroy your house, kill everyone but you. You will be mine." Police were certain that the author of the note was April's killer. Along with the note, they found a used condom which was sent for laboratory analysis. By February 2004, DNA testing was commonly used, and experts had already developed a DNA profile from the semen found on April's body. The analysis revealed that the DNA from the condom matched this profile, but the suspect was not listed in the FBI database. The police reopened April's case and soon received a report about another note. Another girl had discovered a plastic bag containing a similar message. The note stated that the writer had killed April Tinsley and threatened to kill her as well. Inside the bag was another used condom, which also contained the DNA of the same man. In the following months, police received 2 more reports of similar notes found by other girls. In these cases, the perpetrator included Polaroid photos of his genitals. Police examined the images for clues to identify the suspect, but they only found a green-patterned bedsheet in the background, which was on the killer's bed. They searched for stores that sold similar bedding, but this effort did not yield any leads. Over the course of a few months, the perpetrator left 4 notes, but then he suddenly stopped communicating for years. In February 2009, the FBI released a profile of the killer based on eyewitness descriptions of his appearance, hoping to generate new leads. However, this did not help the Fort Wayne police. The case remained a top priority for a number of reasons. Most importantly, they wanted to bring justice to April and hold the killer accountable. The killer also taunted the police with his messages, confident that he would never be caught. He even threatened other girls and left his DNA for the police to find. Police collected numerous biological samples over the years, but April's killer was never matched to the FBI database. This means he had not been arrested for serious crimes and was still at large. In 2012, April's case was featured on a popular television show about unsolved cases, but with no new leads, the case went cold again. In February 2015, police reopened the investigation and contacted Parabon, a company that provides investigative services to law enforcement. Experts there create portraits based on DNA samples, and this approach has helped solve several cases. Police contacted Parabon, who created a portrait of the suspect in April's case. The portrait was posted online and shared with the media in the hope that someone would recognize the person. Unfortunately, they did not receive any useful leads. However, the police were determined to continue their investigation. In February 2018, they contacted Parabon again, this time to use a new method called genetic genealogy. Experts take a DNA sample and search public genetic databases to find potential relatives of the DNA sample owner, even if they are distant relatives. They often find thousands of people, then research their family tree and identify someone who fits the criteria of the perpetrator, such as gender, age, and place of residence at the time of the crime. The special thing about this method is that the DNA owner does not need to be in any stored database. This method identifies them through relatives. The police investigating April's case sent the killer's DNA sample to Parabon again and waited for the results. Tracing the family ties took months as experts analyzed the extensive data. They eventually told police they had narrowed the DNA lineage down to 2 brothers living in Fort Wayne. The police's next step was to find out if one of the brothers was the killer. They tracked both men down and collected their trash, hoping experts could extract DNA samples from it. 30 years after April's death, police found a DNA match between samples taken from April's body and a condom found at the scene, leading police to John Miller, 59. He lived in a small town called Grable, near where April's body was found. He was 29 years old at the time of the murder and lived in a trailer. The police's next step was to take a DNA sample directly from John and question him. When police approached his trailer, they informed him that they wanted to ask him some questions at the station. John inquired about the reason for their visit, and one officer asked him to guess. He then replied, "April Tinsley." The police decided to take John to the station for further questioning. During the ride, he chatted comfortably with the police. When they began questioning John, he confessed to kidnapping and killing April. According to John, on the day April disappeared, he deliberately went to Fort Wayne and drove around the streets looking for a girl to kidnap. Finding April on a deserted street, he stopped and told her to get into his car. He said April silently agreed, which the police found strange. However, witnesses did not hear any screams or signs of a struggle, so the police did not rule out the possibility that John convinced April to get into the car willingly. He took her to his trailer, sexually assaulted her, and killed her. He then loaded her body into his pickup truck, drove to the fields, and dumped her in a ditch. He also admitted that the adult toys found at the scene belonged to him. 6 months after his arrest, when John Miller's trial began, John, on the advice of his attorney, pleaded not guilty. John received a plea deal. The prosecutor initially sought the death penalty, but if John admitted guilt, the sentence would be replaced with a prison term. Ultimately, Miller accepted the plea deal, confessed his guilt in court, and was sentenced to 80 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2058, when he will be 99 years old. April's mother, who attended the trial, was disappointed that John was not given the death penalty but admitted that given his age, the chances of him being released were slim. April's father was unable to attend the trial due to health reasons, but he expressed gratitude to the police for their efforts in finding his daughter's killer. 19-year-old Barbara Mae Tucker lived in Gresham, Oregon, in 1980. She was a sophomore studying business at Mount Hood Community College. Barbara was last seen on the evening of January 15, 1980. She was on her way to a night class at the community college. Multiple witnesses who drove by saw Barbara running onto Kane Drive from the wooded area on the west edge of the campus. It appeared to the witnesses that she was waving at someone or trying to get people's attention, but no one stopped to help her. The next morning, a fellow student found Barbara's body in a wooded area off the campus. She had been assaulted. Her belongings were also found nearby. Another witness came forward, telling investigators that he saw an unknown man who had led Barbara back to the campus against her will. Her family believed that she may have accepted a ride from someone because she would not have walked to the class on that rainy night. Investigators collected DNA from the crime scene that belonged to an unknown male and stored it so that it could be used later. Unfortunately, decades went by without identifying a suspect. Barbara's father, Albert Tucker, passed away in 1989, and her mother, Louise Tucker, passed away in 1995 without learning who took their daughter's life. The Gresham Police Department recently contacted C.C. Moore from Parabon Nanolabs to solve the case. Parabon makes use of genetic genealogy, a process where an unknown suspect's DNA left at a crime scene can be identified by their family members, who voluntarily submitted their DNA to a genealogy database. This allows investigators to create a much larger family tree than if they were limited to law enforcement databases, such as CODI's. Using this process, investigators discovered that the unknown male DNA found at the crime scene back in 1980 belonged to 59-year-old Robert Plimpton. On June 8, 2021, he was arrested at his home in Troutdale, Oregon. He is married and has a son. He is currently in custody at the Multnomah County Detention Center. At the time of the crime, Robert was 16 years old and in high school. Investigators found that he had a quite long criminal history. He was convicted of kidnapping in 1985 and served a 2.5-year sentence until 1987. He also served sentences for driving under the influence and parole violations. In 1997, he was also accused of assaulting a woman, but the case was dismissed. Investigators are also looking into the possibility that he could very well be responsible for more crimes. C.C. Moore from Parabon said, "I have worked on hundreds of cases, but this case stuck with me unlike any other. I would wake up thinking about it and go to sleep still thinking about it. I'm so happy the family will get some answers, though I don't believe there's such a thing as closure. But if he is convicted, there may be some justice." Barbara's siblings lost hope that the case would ever be solved. They were convinced that the person who took Barbara's life was deceased. They said that she had sadly never aged past 19. She was almost 6 feet tall, strong, and athletic. Her hair was light brown, her eyes a warm chocolate brown. She was outgoing, smart, and determined. Barbara was the first one in her family to attend college, but sadly, she would never get to graduate. The news after his arrest brought overwhelming emotions from her siblings. The extraordinary break in the case provides some comfort, but it has also reignited their grief. Someone brutally took her away from us when she was so young and went on living their life after. We want to see some justice, and we hope this is the right person. Norm Frink, now a retired chief from the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, recalls all the work that was put in to solve the case. He also remembers how absolutely devastated Barbara's parents were and how they blamed themselves. "I only wish this had happened sooner, but the technology has evolved, and fortunately, there's finally been an arrest. It is a positive development, and I'm just sorry that Barbara's parents did not live to see it. "15-year-old Julie Ann Hansen lived in Naperville, Illinois, in 1972. She was described as a very personable and sweet girl. On July 7, 1972, Julie was last seen leaving home on her bicycle, heading to a baseball game. When she did not return home, her family grew worried and called the police, informing them that Julie was missing. The next day, on July 8th, Julie's body was found in a cornfield in Aprilville. She had been assaulted and stabbed close to 40 times. Investigators followed leads and questioned potential suspects, but they were unable to identify the man who committed the heinous crime. In 2020, investigators believed that Bruce Lindahl could be the man they were looking for. He was involved in a similar crime that I've covered on my channel before. Investigators tested his DNA, but it did not match the DNA of an unknown male that they collected from the crime scene in Julie's case. Finally, on June 9, 2021, investigators announced that they had arrested 76-year-old Barry Lee Welpley in connection to the case. They said that his DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene but did not want to provide any more information, as it could compromise their case against him. We do know that he was arrested at his home in Mounds View. At the time of the crime, he was 27 years old, worked as a welder, and lived less than a mile from where Julie lived. He is currently being held at a Will County jail, and his bond was set at $10 million. One of Barry's family members had used a commercial DNA service to explore family history, and it led investigators to Barry after all these years. Anyone with information is encouraged to contact the Naperville Police Department at their number and ask for the Investigations Division. Naperville Police Chief Bob Marshall said, "Both past and present investigators never gave up on Julie. Julie's parents had passed away, but other family members were grateful for the news." The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996, in Kansas, as the oldest of 5 children. She was a responsible sibling, often putting her parents' needs before her own. Her family was deeply rooted in their faith, spending a significant amount of time at church. When Zoe was in high school, her family moved to Dallas, where she attended a school that fostered her creativity and passion for the arts. She excelled in drawing and enjoyed participating in school plays. Outside of school, Zoe worked at an art studio and as a lifeguard during her summer breaks. After graduating, Zoe had the opportunity to attend top universities, but she decided to delay her education to focus on her church. In October 2015, at the age of 18, Zoe was preparing for a mission trip with her church. She planned to attend the Sunday service to discuss the trip's details. Zoe left her house around 4:40 p.m. in the family minivan, promising her parents she would return for dinner. However, she failed to come back, which was unusual for her. Zoe's parents tried to reach her after the service, but she didn't respond to their messages or calls. They then contacted her friends, thinking she might have visited someone, but no one had seen her. As the evening wore on, her parents grew increasingly worried and decided to call the church to see if Zoe had shown up there. However, they were surprised to learn that Zoe had never arrived at the church. This was highly unusual behavior for Zoe, as she had always kept her parents informed of her whereabouts and had never disappeared without explanation. So, they drove to the police station to report Zoe missing, and the police began the search. The police spent all night retracing the route from Zoe's house to the church but found no sign of her. Using an iPhone tracking app, police were able to locate her phone. They discovered Zoe's phone just a few hundred yards from the church, near a small creek across the street. Zoe's parents rushed to the creek. An officer approached them and informed them that a car accident had been reported a few hours earlier and that police had received a call from a witness walking a dog. That witness claimed that a man had approached him and said a woman had been injured in a car accident near the creek. The witness rushed to the scene and found a woman lying in a pool of blood, so he called 911. As the police investigated, they quickly identified the victim as Zoe Hastings. However, it soon became clear that she had not died as a result of the accident. The evidence suggested that she had been murdered. Zoe's body was found a short distance from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the creek. There was a significant amount of blood near her body, and police observed multiple cuts on her neck. Her dress was pulled up, and her underwear was rolled down, leading detectives to suspect that the killer had likely assaulted her. The police prevented Zoe's parents from approaching her body, shielding them from the gruesome scene. As they investigated further, they discovered several clues. Notably, all the minivan doors except the driver's side were locked, suggesting that the perpetrator may have driven the vehicle themselves or approached Zoe directly at the scene. Beneath the bridge, about 10 feet from the creek, a blood-stained knife was discovered. It was likely that this was the weapon used in Zoe's murder. By examining her phone records and GPS data, investigators established that Zoe had arrived at the creek by 5:01 p.m. after leaving home at 4:41 p.m. GPS revealed she drove there in approximately 20 minutes, indicating her death probably occurred within a few minutes of arrival. To account for this timeline, investigators reconstructed her activities that afternoon, tracing her stops from leaving her home. During the examination, investigators uncovered evidence that Zoe visited the nearby DVD rental store after departing home to return a DVD she had borrowed. The rental shop was situated beside a Walgreens near her residence. More than 50 people in the area had confirmed this. Among them was Lester Clark, a tattoo shop employee who worked next door to the DVD store. It wasn't until a few hours after work, around 4:45 p.m., that Lester revealed he had seen a female customer who had been shopping at the store and had approached her. Lester admitted to having witnessed Zoe going to the DVD rental store. He added that he saw a man behaving suspiciously near the crime scene. Lester described the man as short, heavily built, and African American. However, Lester was too far away to notice any other distinguishing features. Later that evening, Lester saw the same man walking toward the store alone. The witness, Gary Whitman, a homeless man, corroborated Lester's account. At around 4:45 p.m., Gary saw a woman approaching a white minivan in the parking lot. A man then approached her from behind, preventing her from entering the vehicle. The man showed her something from his pocket, and the woman subsequently got into the car, moving to the passenger seat. The man then drove away. Gary also described the suspect as short, heavily built, and African American, and found the situation highly suspicious. He went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911, but it is unclear if the clerk made the call. During the investigation, experts made several key discoveries. A forensic pathologist examined Zoe's body and found a small amount of male semen, indicating that Zoe had been sexually assaulted before being murdered. However, the amount of semen was too small to conduct a full DNA analysis. Investigators analyzed Zoe's car for any foreign fingerprints on the doors or steering wheel but found none. This discovery, combined with witness statements, suggested that the killer may have driven Zoe away in her minivan. However, the lack of fingerprints did not mean that the killer did not drive the car, as they may have wiped down the surfaces after the crime. When examining Zoe's body, investigators found several hairs, but they were too small to extract a full DNA sample from. However, a breakthrough came when a DNA sample was found on a knife near the crime scene. The DNA was matched to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran, who had a violent criminal history, including arrests for theft, assault, and home invasion. 1 year before the murder, Antonio was accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of his girlfriend. According to the girl, Antonio offered her a ride but took her to a secluded area and assaulted her. He was arrested and claimed that the sex was consensual, but the prosecution was unable to prove his guilt, and he was acquitted. Antonio became the prime suspect in the murder investigation. As a result, he was arrested. However, during the interrogation, Antonio denied any involvement in the crime. To gather more evidence, investigators collected a DNA sample from Antonio and compared it to the semen found on the victim's body. Unfortunately, both DNA samples were too small for a full analysis, so the experts used a different method. The partial DNA profiles from the hair and semen were then compared to Antonio's DNA. The results showed a match, but not definitively. Meanwhile, detectives searched Antonio's smartphone and found some incriminating text messages. On the day before the murder, Antonio sent a message to a friend he lived with, stating he was moving out and would never see him again. At 1:48 a.m. the next day, Antonio sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, telling her that his stepmother had died right in front of him. But this information was later found to be false. In the hour leading up to Zoe's death, Antonio sent 2 texts to another woman, revealing that he had been drinking, driving around the city, and crying. These messages were his last before the incident. Later that evening, at 9:30 p.m., Antonio texted a friend, expressing confusion and despair about his life. The next day, he sent a message to his ex-girlfriend, stating that his life was over and that she would soon understand why. Detectives investigating Antonio's online activities found that he had visited local news websites over 30 times before his arrest, with a particular focus on the crime sections. Notably, 5 of these accesses were directly related to articles about Zoe's murder. This was unusual, as prior to Zoe's death, Antonio rarely visited news sites. His browser history also showed a single visit to a page about gang activity. Further investigation of Antonio's smartphone revealed GPS data showing that at 4:34 p.m., Antonio's phone connected to a cell tower covering the area where the store was located, coinciding with the time Zoe was there. Although this data was not conclusive evidence, it suggested that Antonio's phone was in the vicinity of the store just minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. This was significant, as Antonio's home was far away, and his phone had been connected to a different nearby tower throughout the day. Detectives discovered that Antonio had started working at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. However, on the day after the murder, he skipped his shift without providing any explanation. Despite the extensive circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the strongest evidence remained his DNA on the knife handle. Nevertheless, this evidence alone might not be enough for a conviction, as merely holding a knife does not prove involvement in the murder. It is possible that Antonio used the knife in a different context, and someone else could have used it to commit the crime. Since no other evidence was found, detectives decided to proceed with the case and take it to court. The prosecution presented its report of the events. According to the prosecution, Antonio approached Zoe in the parking lot, threatening her with a knife and forcing her to get into her car. He then took the driver's seat and drove away. The prosecution argued that Antonio, who was emotionally distressed due to the death of a relative and intoxicated from consuming a significant amount of alcohol, had intended to assault Zoe when he abducted her. He chose his victim, Zoe, by chance when he spotted her in the parking lot. Antonio saw an opportunity to commit a crime and acted on it. He then drove to a secluded creek area that was difficult to spot due to the surrounding trees and low-lying terrain. At this location, he forced Zoe out of the car and attacked her, stabbing her 6 times in the neck area. Antonio got back into the car and tried to drive it into the creek, possibly to hide any remaining evidence. However, the car only partially submerged, allowing Antonio to potentially wipe his fingerprints from the steering wheel and door handle before fleeing the scene and returning to the store, where Lester had seen him, according to initial testimony. The defense argued that most of the evidence was not convincing enough and did not prove Antonio's guilt. For example, hair analysis only showed that the DNA could not be ruled out as belonging to Antonio, but it did not confirm his involvement. DNA on the knife also did not necessarily prove that Antonio committed murder. The defense argued that Antonio could have touched the knife under different circumstances before working at the store. They suggested he might have used the knife while working at a movie theater, where he sometimes collected items left behind by visitors. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Furthermore, if someone had taken the knife from the theater and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to be careful to avoid removing Antonio's DNA from the handle, which would have been a difficult task. The defense attempted to downplay the testimony of the witness, Gary, by revealing that Gary had a warrant for his arrest due to a parole violation. They tried to exclude Gary's testimony, but the prosecution argued that Gary's willingness to cooperate with police despite the risk of arrest, proved his sincerity. Gary insisted he wanted to do the right thing, even if it meant getting arrested. Antonio's lawyers argued that their client was elsewhere at the time of Zoe's murder, helping a friend, but they failed to provide any substantial evidence to support this claim. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty for Antonio, but as the trial progressed, they realized this would be difficult to achieve with the available evidence. They dropped the request for the death penalty. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Antonio guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents expressed gratitude to the investigators and all those involved in the trial for delivering justice for their daughter. Her father shared that he had always warned his children about the dangers of the world and had taken every precaution to protect them. However, despite his efforts, his eldest daughter was abducted just a short distance from their home, and he was powerless to prevent it. "16-year-old Molly and Bish lived with her family in a small community of Warren, Massachusetts in 2000. Molly got her first job as a lifeguard at Comins Pond. The pond is isolated, surrounded by mostly woods. On June 27th, Molly's mother Maggie dropped her off at a pond for work. A few hours later, Maggie received a disturbing call. A police officer informed her that several people have called the police department, saying there was no lifeguard at a pond. Maggie drove there and found Molly's flip-flops, chair, first aid kit, radio and lunch, but no sign of Molly. Investigators were quickly on the scene and they searched the surrounding woods, but also found no sign of Molly. Investigators and Molly's family were convinced that she was abducted and did not leave by herself. Maggie told investigators that she believes as she knows who abducted Molly. The day before Molly was last seen, also dropped her off at a pond. She saw a man sitting in a white sedan in a parking lot. His presence made her uncomfortable. When she dropped Molly off on the day she disappeared, Maggie did not see the man, but witnesses said that they saw him in the parking lot that day. A sketch was made of the man that Maggie saw, hoping someone would identify him. Molly's family also created a website trying to get more eyes on the case. In 2002, Molly's case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries. It was also featured on Hunting Evidence, America's Most Wanted, and Disappeared. In late fall 2002, a hunter saw a blue bathing suit in a woods on Whiskey Hill in Hampton County, Massachusetts. The area was searched, and then on June 9, 2003, Molly's body was found. The area is just 5 miles from her family home. It was not possible to say how she passed away, but investigators were positive that someone took her life. Investigators believed that Molly's case could be connected to the case of Holly Barronin. 10-year-old Holly lived in Grafton, Massachusetts. She disappeared in August 1993. In October of the same year, her body was found by hunters in Hampton County, Massachusetts. Even though the two cases took place 7 years apart, investigators believed it could be connected because the two girls looked similar and were both found in the same area. In the years since Molly's body was found, there have been a few suspects. There was never enough evidence, however, to make an arrest. In June of 2021, investigators announced a other person of interest in Molly's case. Francis Summers' senior investigators did not want to say what exactly led them to Francis, as the investigation is still ongoing. District Attorney Joseph Early had us to say, however, we got information, every tip has to be verified. The tip was verified, and as it was verified and corroborated, we got more information and led us to this point where we are today, where we believe he is a person of interest, a suspect if you will. We know that Francis was born in 1945. He ran an auto repair shop in Massachusetts. He was convicted of abducting and assaulting a 21-year-old woman in 1981. In 2016, he passed away. I hope that we are getting closer, and I hope that we coming to an end to this really, really tragic story. I believe if it is not science that's going to figure it out, it is definitely going to be someone who is brave enough to tell their story and tell their piece. And maybe it'll fit into the pieces and we'll get a whole picture and end the whole story and have a better idea of what happened to Molly. We're getting closer no matter what, so I'm confident in that, but I'm scared. Honestly, I'm kind of scared to know what happened to my sister. The investigators encourage anyone with information on Francis or any additional information on Molly's case to call the anonymous step line at his number. On May 2, 2014, a cleaning crew found skeletal remains in Mastic Beach in Long Island, New York. Suffolk County police officers then investigated the area the body was found in. It was discovered that the remains belonged to a Caucasian woman. She was about 5 feet and 4 inches tall. A DNA sample was taken from the bones of the woman. A DNA profile was then created. Recently, genetic genealogy was used to help identify the woman. On May 28, 2021, the Suffolk County Police Department announced that the woman was identified as 51-year-old Lisa Westford. Lisa lived in Long Island, in a 60 block of Parkway Drive in New York. She was last seen at her home on January 8, 2014. She suffered from schizophrenia and attempted to take her own life on a regular basis. When Lisa was last seen, she was wearing blue jeans, with flared bottoms and neon-colored size 7 DC sneakers. The manner in which she passed away is still not known yet. If you perhaps knew her or have any useful information, you can call the Suffolk County Police Department at this number. On February 1, 1991, a woman's body was found in a swampy area of Jackson County, Mississippi. It was believed that a woman was in her 20s and that had brown hair. A clay reconstruction were made in hopes that someone would be able to identify her, but unsurprisingly, no one did. In 2012, DNA was taken from her body so that DNA profile could be created. It was then submitted to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, but no matches could be made. It would only be recently had investigators would be able to identify the woman using genetic genealogy. In 2019, the Mississippi Crime Lab worked alongside DNA companies to help identify the Jane Doe. They were able to build a family tree using the DNA that belonged to the woman. Then, in March 2021, a sibling of the victim was identified. Investigators talked with him, and he confirmed that he had a sister named Kimberly, who went missing in 1990. DNA was collected from him, and after some more testing, the Jane Doe was finally identified as Kimberly and Funk in June of 2021. 22-year-old Kimberly lived in Sharon, Pennsylvania. She spent some time in Houston, Texas, and made her way to the Mississippi Gulf Coast sometime between April and June 1990. Investigators are trying to create a timeline of her whereabouts from April 1990 to the start of 1991, when her body was found. Anyone with information on this case can contact the Jackson County Sheriff's Office at his number or Mississippi Crime Stoppers. The case of Hannah Clark. Hannah Clark was born on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother of 3 young children, 2 sweet girls, Aaliyah and Liana, and a rambunctious boy named Trey. Hannah's loved ones remember her as a kind and gentle soul with a bright smile that could light up anyone's heart. She was a selfless and caring mother who gave her all to her children. Hannah's family life was marked by her relationship with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player for the New Zealand Warriors team. Despite their significant age difference, they formed a strong bond, which deepened over time. Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, struggled to accept Rowan, but Hannah refused to listen to her concerns. People close to Rowan shared negative opinions about him. Sue, Hannah's mother, had a nagging feeling that something was off about Rowan. She perceived him as arrogant and self-centered, which made her uneasy. She was also concerned about the significant age gap between Rowan and Hannah. When they met, Hannah was a recent graduate while Rowan was 31 years old. Additionally, Rowan's past relationships were a worry for Sue, particularly since he was still in the process of divorcing his previous wife and was living with her at the time. When Hannah introduced Rowan to her parents, they questioned him about his ex-wife. Rowan explained that he was staying with her due to their son. Eventually, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued his relationship with Hannah. In February 2011, he proposed to her and she accepted. They got married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia, the The following year, they had 3 children together. Hannah and her family, including her father Rowan, were passionate about sports. However, Rowan's muscular physique, developed during his professional athlete days, was partly due to steroid use, which led to mental health issues. As a personal trainer, Hannah's approach differed from her father's. She was loved by her clients for her kindness, empathy, and dedication, earning her a loyal following. Rowan's approach to training was unique, but his behavior was marred by aggression and inappropriateness, likely caused by steroid use. This made him a poor trainer, as clients don't need someone who makes them feel uncomfortable. Rowan struggled to communicate effectively with people, which negatively impacted his career and finances. As a result, his wife Hannah had to become the primary breadwinner, which further irritated Rowan. He felt emasculated by her success, as she was doing a better job than he was. Despite their financial struggles, they decided to open their own fitness club. However, this decision was largely driven by Rowan's desire to control Hannah's every move and monitor her whereabouts. Rowan's behavior in the store mirrored his past actions at the gyms where he worked. He often felt the need to assert superiority over women. During a private training session with So's mother, he showed his cruel side, acting inappropriately instead of showing respect. He dropped So, causing her to hit her head and bleed, and laughed at her clumsiness, showing no sympathy. Despite this alarming behavior, Hannah's parents tried to accept him for their daughter's sake. Rowan's control over Hannah was all-encompassing, and he isolated her from her family and friends. He dictated who she could see and when, and even forbade the children from visiting their grandmother and Hannah from communicating with her brother, whom he disliked. As a result, Hannah felt trapped and enslaved, confined to the walls of her own home. Rowan's behavior towards Hannah was also emotionally and physically abusive. He would demand intimacy from her, and if she refused, he would become enraged, taking out his anger on her and the children. After forcing himself on her, he would then apologize insincerely, attributing his behavior to a burst of passion. Hannah's life was slowly under the constant control and cruelty of her husband, Rowan. Their marriage, once filled with love and passion, had degenerated into a nightmare of fear and submission. Rowan's tyrannical behavior had created a toxic environment where Hannah lived in constant terror of his wrath. Rowan's cruelty was not limited to Hannah. He also targeted their children. While some playful exchanges between parents and children are normal, Rowan frequently crossed the line, intentionally hurting and belittling them. When the children cried, he would mock them, showing no empathy or respect for their feelings. For example, a conflict between Rowan and his daughter Aaliyah turned disastrous when Rowan used excessive force, causing Aaliyah to hit her head. The injury was severe enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of taking responsibility and apologizing, Rowan blamed Aaliyah for the incident. This was not an isolated incident, as Rowan had a history of tormenting his children. As an athlete, he would take ice baths after training, but he would also force his children, including his young son Trey, to sit in icy water, disregarding their tears and pleas for mercy. In the same year, Hannah's life took a drastic turn for the worse. Rowan, who had recently become interested in jiu-jitsu, returned home from a training session one day, still pumped up with adrenaline. Without warning, he physically attacked Hannah, grabbing her throat with a tight grip and uttering terrifying words. Consumed by fear, Hannah didn't immediately recognize that she was experiencing domestic violence. However, this incident was far more frightening than anything she had previously endured. As a result, Hannah made up her mind to leave Rowan at the earliest chance. After reaching out to the police, she provided a detailed account of the horrific experience to the officer. The police officer informed Hannah that forcing an intimate relationship without consent is a form of domestic violence. This conversation was a turning point for Hannah, helping her understand the situation and prompting her to take immediate action. She quickly gathered her children and left for her parents' house, trying to escape the abusive situation. Although their divorce was not yet finalized in November 2019, Hannah made the decision to allow Rowan to spend time with their children. However, she was aware that she had no legal authority to control this arrangement without a court's intervention. Even so, Hannah was still uneasy about leaving the children in Rowan's care. To fix his problem, Rowan was struggling to cope with his emotions and sought help from his church's pastor, Christopher. Christopher was a kind and supportive person who was always willing to listen. However, as Rowan began to open up to him, Christopher noticed some disturbing traits. Rowan had a desire for dominance and control, which he occasionally revealed when his confidence faltered. During one of these moments, Rowan confessed to Christopher that he was aware his actions were wrong and wanted to change, but didn't know how. Rowan's admission was a crucial step towards reform, and Christopher's guidance could have been instrumental in helping him. However, before progress could be made, a shocking event occurred. Hannah and her children were walking down the street when Rowan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, grabbed their daughter Lion, and disappeared. Hannah's life was turned upside down by unbearable anxiety and fear for her daughter Lion's safety. For 2 agonizing days, she had no idea where Lion was, and her distress grew by the minute. Hannah turned to the police, who launched a search and eventually found Lion safe and sound with her father. Although Lion was unharmed, the traumatic experience left a lasting impact on Hannah. The police, recognizing the danger that Hannah and her children faced, urged her to file a police report against her ex and obtain a protection order. However, despite the problems her ex, Rowan, had caused, he still had joint custody of the children, which he used to continue manipulating and abusing Hannah. After a meeting with Rowan, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. However, before leaving, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying pictures of her in her underwear on his car, in plain sight of their children. Hannah, enraged, tried to remove the photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and punched her in the face, splitting her lip. The attack was only stopped when Hannah's mother, Sue, intervened. As Rowan drove away, he yelled insults. Hannah, traumatized, immediately reported the incident to the police, as it was a clear violation of the protection order. Unfortunately, the authorities were unable to respond in time, which ultimately led to a tragic outcome. It was a typical morning on February 19, 2020. Hannah grabbed her car keys and left her parents' house to drop off her 3 kids at kindergarten. Hannah and her children got into the car, but before they could leave, Rowan jumped in, causing Hannah to become frightened for their safety. She tried to calm Rowan down, but he was furious and began yelling threats and ordering Hannah to start the car and drive away. Hannah carefully drove off, trying not to escalate the situation. As she turned on to Raven Street, the car stopped. In a desperate and vengeful act, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the car seat and drenched Hannah and her children with it. Michael ZCK, who happened to be nearby, witnessed the horrific scene. He said that earlier that morning, he had heard a car pull up outside his house. Hannah, frantic and pleading for help, screamed that Rowan was trying to kill her and pouring gasoline all over them. As Hannah begged for mercy, Rowan refused to let her go, his face twisted in a rage. Michael rushed to the car and was met with a Rowan's emotionless face, holding a lighter in his hand. In the next moment, the car erupted in flames. The explosion was followed by blood-curdling screams, a deafening ringing, and then an eerie silence. Luckily, Hannah had narrowly escaped the inferno, but was left with severe burns and bleeding. Frantically, she pleaded for assistance, not for her own suffering, but for her children who remained trapped in the blazing car. A car happened to drive by, and a doctor who was not on duty stopped to offer assistance. Seeing Hannah's distress, the doctor rushed to her side. Meanwhile, Michael intervened quickly, grabbing a hose from his house to try and extinguish the flames. However, the fire was too intense and it engulfed the entire car, leaving no hope of rescuing the children. The doctor and Michael yelled at Hannah to take cover and get away from the fire, but she was too consumed by grief to hear them. With growing desperation, Michael rushed to the car to rescue the children, but the intense flames and scorching heat thwarted his efforts. Hannah lay on the road, her body badly burned, repeatedly begging for someone to save her children. At that moment, no one grasped the full extent of the tragedy. Hannah's body was severely burned, with over 97% of her skin damaged, except for her feet. Despite her excruciating pain, Hannah's thoughts were consumed by her children, who were now left vulnerable and unprotected. Hannah's badly burned body left police doubting her survival chances. Yet she refused to give up. With fierce determination, she provided a crucial testimony. Police officer Angus Cook carefully recorded every word Hannah spoke as she struggled to recount the events leading up to her tragic situation. With great difficulty, Hannah managed to name her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the person responsible for her ordeal and provided a detailed account of what had happened. As Hannah's voice grew weaker and her body frail, Officer Angus remained by her side, offering words of encouragement and praise for her bravery. He reassured her that she had already done enough and that everything would be okay. Hannah was on the brink of death, yet she didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about whether Rowan had threatened her earlier, she replied that he hadn't. As doctors approached to alleviate her suffering, she lost the ability to speak. Meanwhile, Rowan Baxter's behavior was erratic. Despite suffering severe burns covering 80% of his body, he managed to exit the car unassisted. Rowan sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After a brief moment, he inexplicably climbed back into the car, which was engulfed in flames. A witness, putting their own life at risk, attempted to extinguish the fire at the back of the car. It was then that Rowan retrieved a knife from the vehicle and began to chase people away, preventing them from putting out the flames. The children, trapped in the burning car, had little chance of survival. Nevertheless, bystanders refused to give up their efforts to save them. Rowan refused to let anyone approach the car, claimed them to a horrific death. In a final, selfish act, he stabbed himself with the knife. Despite her own life-threatening injuries, her primary concern was for the health of her children and her desire to reveal the truth. Tragically, Hannah passed away in the hospital on the same day, at the young age of 31. Hannah was a victim of severe domestic violence, which also affected her children. She fought tirelessly to protect her family from their abuser, but sadly, her efforts were ultimately unsuccessful. Throughout her daily struggles, Hannah showed immense courage, standing up for her loved ones despite the numerous challenges she faced. For days later, a massive gathering took place to pay tribute to Hannah and her children. A lasting memorial, Hannah's house, was also created in Camp Hill, where a tree planting ceremony was held in her honor, accompanied by a plaque that tells the story of her life. At 9:20 a.m. on November 1st, 1980, the body of a Caucasian girl was discovered by a truck driver who was driving past the Sam Houston National Forest. Her body was about 20 feet from Interstate Highway 45 in Walker County, Texas. An autopsy concluded that the victim passed away about 6 hours before being found. She was approximately 5 feet and 6 inches in height and weighed 105 pounds. It was estimated as was between 14 and 20 years old. Her hair was a light brown, and a medical examiner believed she may have come from a middle-class household, due to the excellent dental care she had received. It was determined that the victim had been strangled and assaulted. DNA from an unknown man was collected from her body. Investigators appealed to the public for anyone who might know the victim or might have seen her before her life was taken. Some witnesses informed investigators, and I saw a teenage girl matching the victim's description a few hours before she passed away. This included the manager of a South End golf station who told investigators what the victim had been wearing, and said that she arrived at the station at 6:30 in the evening, just 15 hours before her body was found. The victim apparently climbed out of a 1974 Chevrolet Caprice and asked for directions who takes his Department of Corrections. Alice Prison Farm. After receiving the directions, the victim left on foot along Sam Houston Avenue. 2 other witnesses saw the victim at a hitchhiking post-drug stop alongside Interstate 45. There she again requested directions to the Texas Department of Corrections, Alice Prison Farm. The statements by the witnesses are believed to be true. Inmates and employees of the Alice Prison Farm were canvassed and shown pictures of the victim, but no one was able to identify her. As investigators were also unable to identify the victim, she was named Walker County Jane Doe. On January 16, 1981, Walker County Jane Doe was buried at an Oakwood cemetery. In 1999, her body was exhumed so that a DNA sample can be taken. In recent years, her DNA and a DNA of her attacker that was collected from a bite mark on her body had been tested. But no matches have been made. As DNA is advancing, it seems like it is only a matter of time before a Walker County Jane Doe and her attacker will be identified. In 1995, 17-year-old Deanna Crimmon lived in Somerville, Massachusetts. She attended Somerville High School and was an employee for Star Market. On March 29th, Deanna went out with her friends and then visited her boyfriend. By midnight, she was still not home yet and is worried her family, as her curfew was 10 p.m. Her family was not able to reach her. They then called her boyfriend as he was the last person to have seen her, most likely. He admitted walking her home that night, but said that he had left her halfway. Deanna's family saw this as unusual, as he had always walked her all the way home. The police were called by her family to inform them that Deanna was missing. The next day, her body was found upon a senior housing complex. She was found by two children on their way to school. The senior housing complex is less than a block from her home. An autopsy revealed that she had been assaulted and strangled. Investigators asked anyone with information to come forward. They identified persons of interest, firstly her boyfriend and also a Somerville firefighter who was more than twice her age and was said to have been fixated on her, and then another man who was imprisoned at Massachusetts Correctional Institution. Investigators followed leads and was positive. The case would be solved, but instead the case went cold. In 2009, District Attorney Gerard Lyons said, "Case will be solved," but law enforcement needed witnesses who had remained silent to come forward. Deanna Crimmon's case made a big impact on the community of Somerville. There were over 1,000 people at her funeral. Trees and benches around the city have been dedicated to her. There is also a scholarship in her name. Still today, investigators are working the case. Her family also put up a billboard each year in hopes that the case can finally be solved and there will be justice for Diana. April Dawn Lacey was born on June 2, 1982 in Oklahoma City. Her family was extremely poor and had problems with substance abuse. The family lived in cheap hotels and was often seen looking for aluminum cans to provide money for food and drugs. On October 3, 1996, 14-year-old April ran away after an argument with her parents. They called 911 looking for help in finding April. 5 days later, on October 8th, a farmer in Decatur found the body of a girl in a pile of branches. Investigators who arrived at the scene believed that she had been strangled and dragged by the arm, judging by the position of her body. It was not possible to identify the victim, as the decomposition process was far along. Investigators noted that she had blonde hair, was around 5 feet, 4 inches tall, and weighed 110 pounds. She did not have any identifying features, such as tattoos or scars. A forensic dentist who examined her teeth concluded that she was 14 years old when her life was taken. A forensic artist then made a sketch of what a victim might have looked like, hoping someone would recognize her. Investigators attempted to identify the victim by using her physical description to match the missing persons. As she was found close to the border between Texas and Oklahoma, investigators started with these two states. They soon realized that the victim looked similar to April and they were around the same age. DNA was eventually compared and a match was made. Investigators have followed leads in Oakland, MN, Texas, but they still do not know who took her life. The case of Shauna Nelson. Heather Hodges and Ignacio gets met at a university party where Ignacio's friendly and charming personality immediately caught Heather's eye. It was instant attraction for both of them, and they soon realized they had fallen in love. Heather was a vibrant person with an innocent charm. Her striking features, including pale skin, red lips, and dark hair, captivated Ignacio, who affectionately nicknamed her Snow White. When Ignacio asked Heather out on their date, she was thrilled and shared the news with her roommates, who joined in her excitement. As their relationship grew stronger, Ignacio continued to shower Heather with affection, surprising her with her favorite flowers and coffee. His thoughtful gestures made Heather feel loved and valued. After graduating from the University of Northern Colorado, Ignacio decided to take their relationship to the next level, proposing to Heather and receiving a happy yes in response. Heather set one non-negotiable condition for their engagement. If Ignacio ever cheated on her, she would end their marriage instantly, no matter how sorry he was or how hard he tried to make things right. She made it clear that infidelity was a deal breaker, and she wouldn't tolerate it. Heather and Ignacio got married within a year, surrounded by loved ones on a joyful and beautiful day. After that, Ignacio became a police officer in Gray, Colorado, while Heather worked as a supervisor at the local credit union. Her colleagues and clients adored her for her exceptional ability to comfort them during difficult times. One coworker even described her as wonderful in every way. After 5 years of marriage, Heather and Ignacio decided to have a child. They were overjoyed when Heather gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Victoria. As a mother, Heather's entire world centered around her daughter, and she felt immense happiness. Ignacio also turned out to be an exceptional father. From the outside, it seemed like Heather and Ignacio had the perfect life. In 1997, Heather's life was forever changed when her father passed away from a heart attack. Just days later, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Heather took on the enormous responsibility of caring for her ailing mother, selflessly dedicating herself to her care. Her mother eventually passed away in February 2003. Heather's husband, Ignacio, was a devoted and caring partner who helped take care of their daughter Victoria and managed household chores. After providing emotional support to Heather during her difficult time, Ignacio's focus shifted towards his coworker, Shauna Nelson, a dispatcher at the Gray Police Department. Shauna was married to Ken, a deputy at the Wells County Sheriff's Office, and they had 2 children together, but their marriage was struggling. At Shauna and Ignacio's interaction was friendly, but it gradually became flirtatious. They started exchanging playful comments and compliments, which caught Ignacio's attention. Over time, Shauna captivated him, and his interest deepened. Ignacio spent more time with Shauna, and their connection evolved into a strong emotional bond. As they continued to see each other, their feelings intensified. Their playful flirting turned into passionate and intimate feelings. Despite being married to others, they found themselves powerless against their attraction. The affair between Ignacio and Shauna became the center of town gossip, but Heather remained unaware of her husband's infidelity. Everyone knew the situation, but no one had the courage to tell Heather the truth. As a result, Shauna and Ignacio's secret relationship grew stronger while Heather remained unaware. When Shauna discovered she was pregnant, she excitedly told Ignacio the news. However, Ignacio was not happy and started doubting whether he was the father of the baby, suspecting that it might be her husband Ken's instead. Shauna reassured Ignacio that Ken was not the father because he had a vasectomy after their child. Knowing that he would face severe consequences if Heather found out, Ignacio became anxious. He didn't want the baby and frantically searched for a solution with Shauna's consent. Heather had no idea that her husband, Ignacio, was having an affair with Shauna. Shauna, however, grew tired of being secretive and decided to confront Heather. One day, Shauna, accompanied by her friend Michelle, followed Heather to the grocery store. Shauna and Michelle discreetly trailed Heather around the store, watching her every move. Meanwhile, Heather, unaware of their presence, chatted with a friend on her phone. Eventually, Shauna approached Heather and hurled insults and accusations at her. The encounter left Heather deeply disturbed. Determined to get answers, Heather confronted Ignacio about the incident. She knew Shauna from his work Christmas parties and was aware that Shauna was his coworker at the police department. When Heather asked Ignacio why Shauna, who had always been friendly towards her, would suddenly attack her in the grocery store, Ignacio explained that Shauna had romantic feelings for him, but reassured Heather that she had nothing to worry about. Ignacio promised Heather that he would tell Shauna to leave her alone. He followed through on his promise and confronted Shauna, telling her to stop bothering Heather. However, Shauna became very angry with him and refused to back off. Despite Ignacio's efforts, Shauna continued to harass Heather. One day, Shauna even showed up at Heather and Ignacio's house demanding to speak with Ignacio. This made Heather suspicious of Ignacio's true intentions. Unbeknownst to Heather, Shauna had confided in a coworker at the county dispatch center about her affair with Ignacio, revealing her strong feelings for him. Shauna expressed frustration that Heather, Ignacio's wife, was standing in the way of their relationship. According to the coworker, Shauna also mentioned that she would relieve her frustrations by shooting at targets at the shooting range, imagining that the targets were Heather. Shauna had been having an affair with Ignacio for over a year, but her husband, Ken, remained unaware of the situation until he discovered Shauna's journal, which detailed her relationship with Ignacio. After discovering Shauna's infidelity, Ken chose to stay in the relationship for the sake of their children. Meanwhile, Shauna was aware that Ignacio was having multiple affairs, which motivated her to maintain control over him. She threatened to expose his secrets to Heather if he ever left her. Shauna's obsession with Ignacio intensified, and in July 2005, she got a tattoo of his family name on her leg to solidify her connection to him. Shauna's behavior became increasingly unhealthy, crossing into stalking territory. If Ignacio and Heather took their daughter Victoria out, Shauna and her family would coincidentally appear at the same restaurant. Despite recognizing Shauna's concerning behavior, Ignacio continued their affair. When Shauna became pregnant with Ignacio's child, she insisted on keeping the baby, refusing to consider termination. Shauna had a son named Christian with her coworker, Oso, in March 2006 while still married to Ken. To keep the truth from Oso's wife, Ken offered to raise Christian as his own if Shauna stayed married to him. Shauna agreed to this arrangement. Later that summer, a woman approached Heather, Oso's wife, with surprising news. Shauna had given birth to Oso's baby. Heather was stunned and demanded answers from Oso when she got home. However, Oso lied to her, trying to conceal his affair with Shauna. But one night in December 2006, Heather caught Oso in the act. She waited up for him to return and confronted him as soon as he walked in. This time, Oso decided to be honest with Heather. He confessed to being out with Shauna that night and revealed that their affair had been going on for years. He also told her about Shauna's 2 pregnancies, including her recent birth of his son, Christian. Heather's husband Ignacio confessed to having an affair with Shauna, and Heather kicked him out of the house. However, the next day, she called him back because she didn't want to break up their family and wanted to keep their marriage intact. Heather told Ignacio she loved him and knew he loved her back, but she wasn't ready to forgive him immediately. Instead, she gave him several conditions to fulfill before considering taking him back. These conditions included getting an STD test, seeking counseling, giving up his parental rights to Shauna's baby, and ending his relationship with Shauna. Ignacio agreed to all the conditions and ended his affair with Shauna. However, Shauna was furious and began harassing Heather, even sending her a text message with a picture of her and Ignacio's son, saying, "Flesh and blood." Shauna threatened to sue Ignacio for child support, and her harassment became so bad that Ignacio and Heather had to take precautions to protect their family and property. They even had to get a lawyer to send Shauna a formal notice to stop harassing them. Despite the warnings, Shauna continued to harass Heather through text messages, emails, and voicemails. On January 23, 2007, Shauna dressed in black, wore a Halloween mask, and brandished a gun. She approached Heather as she left work and shot her twice in the head at point-blank range, execution style. Heather died at the scene, and Shauna was later caught and charged with her murder. Ignacio rushed to Heather's trauma room only to be met by a doctor with devastating news. Heather had passed away. This shattered Ignacio, who now had to break the heart-wrenching news to their 9-year-old daughter, Victoria. Telling Victoria that her mother was gone was the most difficult task Ignacio had ever faced. He remembered spending a long time holding and comforting her as they both cried uncontrollably. Meanwhile, at the crime scene, witnesses were sharing their accounts of the murder with the police. One witness described the shooter as suddenly appearing and fleeing in a red pickup truck. Another thought the shooter might have been a woman, judging by the way they ran. The investigation had already raised one name in connection with Heather's harassment: Shauna Nelson, who was aware of Oso's affair. Shauna, a police dispatcher, was suspected of being involved in Heather's shooting. The police were familiar with her and her husband Ken, a police officer, and knew that Ken owned a car similar to the one driven by the shooter. As evidence mounted against Shauna, the police issued an all-points bulletin, APB, for her and the red pickup truck she was believed to be driving. Ken, who was on patrol that night, heard the APB on his radio and immediately started searching for his wife. Within 20 minutes, he found her driving his vehicle near their home. Shauna claimed she had been running errands, but Ken was suspicious because she wasn't wearing shoes despite the cold January weather in Colorado. What really caught Ken's attention, however, was that Shauna was wearing his socks, underwear, and pants. He stopped her, called for backup, and requested assistance. Soon, police officers arrived and took Shauna into custody. The authorities then began investigating to determine if she was involved in Heather's murder. Shauna's DNA was found on a pair of shoes discovered near the crime scene about 1,000 feet away. Additionally, investigators found two .42 caliber Glock Model 22 shell casings in the parking lot where Heather was shot. This was significant because Ken, Shauna's partner, used the same type of gun for work. These findings strengthened the case against Shauna. A Halloween mask similar to the one worn by the shooter was found hidden under the seat of Ken's red pickup truck. At Shauna's home, investigators found a fully filled bathtub, which led some to suspect she was preparing to wash away any potential blood evidence. After Shauna's arrest, her clothing and hands were tested for gunshot residue. The results were positive, further implicating her in the crime. With strong evidence against her, Shauna was charged with degree murder. Although the shell casings matched the weapon used to kill Heather, the judge sentenced her appropriately. However, there was a surprising twist. Ken Nelson, Shauna's husband, handed over his service weapon to his supervisor, but the actual gun used in the murder was never found. Despite this, Ken was charged with tampering with evidence and being an accessory to degree murder because he stopped Shauna after the murder, but failed to detain her. During her interrogation, Shauna claimed she had gone out to run errands and had accidentally put on her husband's dirty clothes from the laundry basket. She said that when she arrived at the store, she realized she had forgotten her wallet and drove back home. When questioned about Heather's murder, Shauna denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime. The police also extensively questioned Ignacio, but he was cleared of all suspicion. In February 2008, Shauna's trial began for Heather Garris's murder. Shauna pleaded not guilty to the charges. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Shauna had a history of affairs with married officers, including Ignacio. Shauna's motive for killing Heather Garris, according to the prosecution, was her obsession with Ignacio. A key witness in the case was Michelle Moore, Shauna's former best friend, who often accompanied her when she would publicly bully Heather Garris. In exchange for a lighter sentence, Michelle agreed to cooperate with the state and testify against Shauna. Michelle testified against Shauna, describing how much Shauna despised Heather Garris and even admitting to helping plan her murder. Shauna took the stand to defend herself, denying the allegations. She vehemently denied telling anyone that she fantasized about killing Heather or picturing her during target practice. Shauna also denied being involved in Heather's death, claiming she was on her way to a liquor store at the time of the shooting. During her testimony, she suggested an alternative theory, accusing her best friend Michelle of being obsessed with her and wanting to make her happy by eliminating Heather. However, when Michelle was questioned as a witness, she rejected Shauna's allegations. The prosecution argued that Shauna wore her husband's clothing during the shooting to frame him for the crime. According to the prosecution, by killing Heather, Shauna's husband's wife, and Ken, her own husband, Shauna and Ignacio, would be free to be together. After deliberating for just 5 hours, the jury delivered a verdict. Shauna Nelson was guilty of degree murder. The judge sternly addressed Shauna, declaring that she deserved every day of her sentence. Shauna's former best friend, Michelle Moore, was sentenced to 9 years in prison for her role in planning Heather's murder. Following Shauna's conviction, Ken Nelson, her husband and a police officer, resigned from the force and filed for divorce. He moved out of state with their children, including Shauna's son, Christian, whom she had with Ignacio. However, Ken later returned to Colorado, hoping that one day the children could visit Shauna in prison. Despite the circumstances, Ken always believed that Shauna was a loving and dedicated mother. The charges against him were eventually dropped. Heather's loved ones are relieved that Shauna is behind bars, feeling that justice has been served, and they hope she reflects on the pain she caused Heather every day for the rest of her life. Shauna's selfish behavior resulted in Heather being separated from her family, which meant Victoria, Heather's daughter, was deprived of her mother. Tragically, in 2015, 17-year-old Victoria died in a car accident when she lost control of her vehicle and hit a tree, ending her life. The case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9: Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Natalie, Gabriel Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively. And at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In February 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father, as she was unemployed and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to 1 meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school attended by the older children had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son, Nathan, about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube. Even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious, at around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter, Mia, to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son, Gabriel, and 1-year-old daughter, Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him inquiring about his work attendance around 6 p.m. On the morning of September 3rd, a coworker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son, Nathan, to bed only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items, such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear, gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.